So, it's indeed an honour to be able to interview you in this forum, the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy. So, Professor Aspinwall, welcome very much. It's a great honour to have you here. And the first question is, you've had the opportunity to teach all over the world, and were you able to observe many differences in cultural diplomacy, especially, for example, maybe between China and the US?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I would say absolutely yes. I mean, I'd give the example of between China and Cuba. Actually, let me say what I mean. Teaching the Chinese starting in the late '90s, it was interesting for me because they. Personally, the students are very well-behaved, very quiet, very still. They sit there they can sit through a class for hours at a time without protesting or shifting around or anything like that. And after a time, it was possible to get them to open up and have a kind of full debate on things that they otherwise, under the communist regime, might have been uncomfortable debating. But within the classroom, they opened up and they were very good about it, about debating openly and having different points of view. That's the key thing. As a teacher in a classroom, you want to try to generate debate. So you're finding dilemmas and divisions and differences on purpose. You're trying to do that. In Cuba, it was exactly the opposite. The students were mature master's students with careers, and although their own behavior was much more relaxed, they would stand up and leave the classroom. They smoke in class. They shout to each other in the classroom. They leave in the middle of it, and then they come back with a coffee, while I'm talking. But you couldn't generate. Talking to them about what's the future of Cuba under a globalized system. Is it going to become more liberalized and open? And they wouldn't debate it at all. You could not get anything to split them apart into different camps, and that's what you look for in a classroom because they were worried about it. So I would say I noticed those. I haven't taught in the U.S. for quite a while, but those differences are significant. And in the U.K., I suppose they're very, very good about spotting intellectual division and so forth and exploiting that. So.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. And then, also, so how have you seen cultural diplomacy evolve throughout your career? You've obviously been teaching for quite a while. And also, what do you think is the future of cultural diplomacy? Where can you see it going next?
Well, there are institutions that promote culture on behalf of states or on behalf of languages. For example, and some of them have grown quite a lot over my career, or come into existence, like the Confucius Institute, which is now so numerous, and we have one of them in Edinburgh, for example, and that's a very impressive change. So there's much more, and there's also more travel, more likelihood to take a year off before students begin university. And then also more likelihood for students to choose to study abroad for their third year. And that, I think, is extremely positive. Now, students go and they learn about another place, they learn about another culture, they learn about, they take courses within another university, so they learn quite a lot about other places. What I'd like to see more of, and I think this actually may be on the decline, is Anglophone students learning foreign languages. Because language, if you talk about cultural diplomacy, language is one of the most important ways actually to make that work properly. Without Spanish, I would not have. I wouldn't know nearly as much about Mexico as I do, or about my Mexican in-laws or the family or society. You have to have that language, and the British students and the American students and other Anglophones are really, really reluctant, more so than they used to be, and unfortunately more than other parts of the world. They're reluctant to learn other languages. So I think that's a disappointment still, but in terms of travel and experience and education in other parts of the world, that has grown. That's good.
Super. And then you are currently a professor at the University of Edinburgh. Mm-hmm. So I was just wondering, there's been much talk about Scotland gaining its independence. And do you think cultural diplomacy could be used in this situation, maybe creating more affinity for the United Kingdom?
Possibly. I mean, I think already the Scots and the English especially know a lot about each other. The Scots know about the Irish, the Scots know about the Welsh, but the Scots and English, I mean, there's very little new to be learned, I think, and they're so integrated in every sense of the word, even more than with the European Union. And so I don't think there's a huge amount new to teach them. I think oftentimes what these boil down to, and this is a point I made upstairs, is self-interest, and particularly material self-interest. And the calculations by the Scots will be, what will this mean for me economically? And that, in a nutshell, when it comes to it, determines a lot of the attitudes, the voting behavior, the positions, the pros and the cons and the interests of people, rather than knowing more about or practicing cultural diplomacy of one kind or another. In fact, the values, the basic underlying values which underpin their culture, are broadly speaking very similar. There's some differences in law and in church and education systems that they like to talk about, but I think you scratch the surface. They're very similar already.
Yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
Okay, you're from over there.
I'm from Northern Ireland.
Ireland, okay, yeah.
But I have a lot of Scottish friends, and a lot of them feel very strongly, they're Scottish, they're not British, not
right.
UK.
They can be that, and that's important, but that's not going to make them vote for independence.
Yeah.
I don't think a lot of them.
I think it should be stay with the United Kingdom, see how that goes.
Now I'm moving to a much more theoretical level. You are a specialist on political economy. Do you think that cultural diplomacy has a place in bargaining theory, which is much more mathematical, can cultural diplomacy be a sword for bargaining power in terms of indirect influence on the opponent?
The second part of the question you have to repeat in a moment because I didn't catch it. But in the first bit, cultural diplomacy could conceivably. I mean, my friend Gerald Schneider, who you know very well, says that anything can be modeled. Any question can be modeled theoretically, including sociological ones or cultural ones. But you have to specify the aspects or the variables, or the aspects of what you're trying to test, and then operationalize it and test it, somehow. So it's conceivable that it could be cultural diplomacy. I think actually it is, in some ways, a little too vaguely specified what it means. What is the basis of it? And I because I was coming here, I did a bit of research on it to try to figure it out. And I know that it's about cultural interchange and education and understanding other systems better and so forth. But that doesn't necessarily lead to a prediction about something. It doesn't necessarily lead to an outcome. It leads to maybe to better understanding. But then the question, like we were talking about soft power, the question is, it's a kind of what you would say is a so what question. What does it mean? What does it lead to? If we understand each other better, or we have more exposure to other cultures and other value systems and other art systems and so forth, does that mean that we're going to like each other better or cooperate better, have less conflict? And the implication often is that yes, but I don't think that's the case. In fact, we were hearing from Ian Gillan how music can be divisive, how it's new, it's rebellious. The Sex Pistols in the 1970s, Deep Purple wasn't allowed to be played in certain places, and it's precisely because art is trying to make a point against some system of power that it gets excluded, that it's divisive, that and so forth, at least until it then is recognized as playing an important role in building consciousness, and that's really important. So, I mean, to answer your question, I think it needs to be the way that cultural diplomacy may work needs to be understood a bit better first. Now, the second part of your question you asked me about, can it be a source for bargaining power, indirect? I think maybe I've answered this a bit.
Yeah.
It can, but also, I was thinking I think it was around 1988-89 when the U.S. military was sent down to Panama to get Manuel Noriega, the Panamanian leader at the time, and he went into hiding in the embassy of the Vatican in Panama, and the U.S. didn't go in and get him out because in international law you're not supposed to do that. What they did instead was to play rock music 24 hours a day at volume 11 outside the embassy to basically harass everybody until he voluntarily gave himself up. That's culture. I don't know what music it was. Maybe it was Black Sabbath, in fact. In a bad way.
Yeah, in a bad way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Thank you very much.
yeah.
My next question would be more on the European Union, since we before talked also about the euro crisis. Some say that through the European financial crisis, the EU institutions, such as the European Central Bank, have been considerably strengthened, which means a step forward towards integration. To what extent do you agree? And is the EU the big winner or the big loser in this crisis?
Well, we don't know yet. I think the EU could be the big winner, and it could also be the big loser. It'll lose if it loses members of the Eurozone, and that's still uncertain. I think it's probably unlikely that it'll lose members, but we don't know that yet, and I don't think it's safe to make a prediction on it, really. I think we'll probably muddle along in a crisis state until, for some foreseeable time right now, until the weaker economies, those that are less productive, particularly the Greek one, they can find a way out of the sovereign debt crisis. I think that the central institutions will probably be strengthened, though, and that includes the European Central Bank and other aspects.
Hope of the Parliament.
Possibly the Parliament, yeah. But in order, especially if more powers are given to the Commission or the system by which states are bailed out or lending is made to them within the Eurozone. So if those are strengthened, then it is likely that democratic accountability will be strengthened through parliamentary strengthening too. So it's quite possible that will happen, but that's a winner in the sense of the institutions themselves being strengthened, but it doesn't necessarily mean that overall the EU is a winner because of the effect on public opinion, because the effect on the morale. I mean, the Spanish, the Greeks, they don't see the European Union as a source of,
See them as an enemy.
Yeah, exactly. The rules, the very, very slow and grudging assistance that has been forthcoming, and so in terms of public support and democratic accountability, credibility, and legitimacy, it's still a very, very uncertain situation, I think. Yeah.
So thank you very much for being here today. It was an honor and a privilege to be able to interview you. Thank you very much.